but actually I'll kick that off. We really connected around this idea of purpose-led organizations, and, how the intersection of your brand and your purpose really, connects with some of the leadership and organizational and management challenges, and really just how a brand can't be strong without strong leadership, and leadership can't be strong without a strong brand, and vice versa. So that was really what informed our thinking around doing the talk today, and the topic that we put together. So we have a bit of an agenda that we were going to walk through and provide a point of view on a few things. Because we're a relatively small group today, though, I would say if anybody wants to jump in, please use your chat. If you have comments to make, I know everybody's on mute at this time, but certainly with such a small group, we can have some dialogue about this too. So if there's anybody that would like to add to the conversation, I'd encourage you to jump in and do so. Just to kick things off, we're going to introduce each other, ourselves, and then launch into things. So do you want to start, Jan?
Sure, certainly. So welcome everyone, and so good to at least see your names. I think you'll be able to unmute yourselves and we'll be able to hear you throughout our time together today. So I'm known to many of you, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of Strategisense Consulting. It's a management consulting firm that's based in Toronto, and we provide strategy and coaching and leadership development and learning programming to nonprofits, charities, foundations, and the public sector. And over the last 21 years, actually, we've been working with thousands of purpose-driven leaders across hundreds of organizations to help deepen their relevance and their impact. So pleased to be able to be here today to dialogue with Shelley and with all of you, and to share our lessons learned and perhaps provide some guidance and support with what you're up to in your organizations.
And I'm, there's a few more people joining, just let them in. I'm Shelley Mayer, and I'm the founder and president of RAM Communications. We're a strategic and creative agency that focuses exclusively in the social impact space. We do quite a bit of work around brand strategy and brand development, both from, as I said, on the strategy side, but also on the design and visual identity, bringing the brand to life through your marketing and communications. So we work with a wide range of charities and nonprofits, as well as with the corporate sector around companies that really want to lead with purpose at the forefront of their brand, and also have strong corporate social responsibility or community engagement programs that they want to build into their brand story and messaging. Very pleased to be here today. So do you want to introduce a little bit, Jan, why we thought the topic for today, which is your purpose-driven brand future ready, how we kind of came up with that topic and what informed that?
Sure. So, really to start off with just an acknowledgement that for many organizations, many leaders, for everyone really in the world, the last 7 months have been unprecedented. And what we found in our work is that purpose-driven leaders and their organizations, they're at the front lines of their communities, both in good times and in challenging times. So with the last 7 months really being kind of a real challenging experience for many of the leaders that both Shelley and I have been working with, we found that we thought of what are some of the topics that we've been supporting our clients with, what are some of the issues that they've been raising with us. And our firm has been running webinars over the last couple of months around a range of topics, and really listening to what leaders have been asking for. And one of them really is this: how do we deal with kind of where we're at right now, and understand our brand, understand how we can leverage and relate to what's happening in our external environment, support our staff, our boards, our stakeholders with understanding who we are and where we're headed, and also as leaders leverage that within our organizations. So we brought this topic forward today because it's one of the ones we've been engaging with our clients with over the many months now of COVID-19. We've learned that the changes that would have typically taken months or years to make within the sectors that we work with, or with the organizations that we work with, have been happening and fast tracked in a matter of weeks, sometimes even days. And that has actually had people kind of turn for a bit of a loop, right? In terms of how do we now settle ourselves and what's to come. And what does that have to do with kind of how we say who we are as an organization, and also drive change within our organizations. So that's why we're here today, to talk about that from the perspective of purpose and brand and being future ready.
And just, to add a little story to that, I guess one of the experiences that one of our past clients had encountered, they're a charity that's at the forefront of the COVID situation, being focused on food security. And one of the things that started happening when COVID hit was this, extreme influx of requests for their organization in terms of partnerships and collaborations. And, all of a sudden, organizations that haven't really thought about, how purpose factors in, or how social impact factors into their organization or their brand, are looking for a way to contribute and give back to the community, and are looking for answers. And so, connecting with this charity, and all of a sudden it creates, obviously it's awesome because it creates a great influx, potentially financially to that organization. But how is the organization prepared to tackle that partnership, for those partnerships, for example, to lead those organizations? So, these, as Jan said, these are the kinds of situations that we're really finding are really forcing organizations to understand truly who they are as a brand, and how to come together with others around that. So definitely have lots of stories like that I've heard. So one of the first questions, and this came up, we did ask when you registered, we asked if you had any questions that you'd like us to cover as part of today. And a couple people asked the question about, what does future ready really mean? Like, what is that? What is the time frame associated with that? When we're talking about future ready, like it's a little bit nebulous or maybe kind of buzzwordy. What do we really mean by that? So Jan's going to kick it off with some thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe I'll start off with just an example or a story of an experience of what we've seen as a future ready organization. What does it mean and look like when we see future ready, and what does it sometimes not look like? And then talk a bit about the definition. So I'll talk about an organization that our firm has been working with for several years now, and recently supported them to integrate with another organization. And when I think of what this organization was encountering, so it's a primary care space, an organization that provides healthcare and social services to their local community. And in seeing what they had to deal with when we went into lockdown several months ago now, the agency did not close down because of the services that they provide, whereas many of their counterparts, many of the referral agencies that they were working with, actually did close down immediately, and we're still trying to figure out how to provide services. This agency and the leadership of this aigensy, within a matter of days, were able to provide curbside services to their clients, go into communities and provide services to their clients, figure out how to reprogram or retool drop-in programs for much needed services for people who are homeless, connect with and advocate with funders around providing funding to support and close the gaps for services that now were needed that didn't have funding to support them, bring partners together and establish tables to find solutions for needs that were emerging based on clients and community members now being at home or homeless and not having access to services. And all happening within a matter of weeks, establishing hotels and spaces for the homeless, all happening within, I'm offering a turn of a dime. And what I see this organization had in place and had been working on for several years was that capacity for nimbleness, that ability to have data at their fingertips, to know who they're serving, to know what their needs are, have an understanding of what potentially would be the impacts of services being closed down, having a leadership that had the capacity to be proactive and strategic, putting in place ways of meeting and sharing information really quickly to respond to the issues, and also having reputation such that people in their partners and other agencies were coming to them for support and direction, to be able to respond to and collaborate and design solutions. That reputation, that brand, that as being known to be an organization that they could be relied on, really served them well through kind of this period of uncertainty and almost every day having new challenges to have to respond to. So I'll talk about this conversation about being future ready, that mindset of looking into the future and actually looking at today and saying, really, the future is now. The future is always in motion. You need to always be prepared for what may come, and perhaps potentially to be able to be innovative and creative. And this, that having a business model, having a way of addressing the evolving needs of their clients and of their communities and of their organization, I'm going to offer is the first thing. And so being clear about how you run your business, the services you're offering, the levers that impact the services you offer, and equally important, the culture of the organization. I think that's the second thing when I think of this organization and what they had in place. They had been working for years on strengthening not only the culture of staff teams and frontline staff, but also of the leadership, because we know that the leadership is what sets the tone, it models, it cultivates, it inspires the culture in the organization. And this culture was one of being creative, not being afraid of failure, like getting it wrong, being able to learn from where things don't go well and bounce back quickly, lots of learning and working under a range of sometimes really adverse conditions. So I'll pause there. Just sort of some of the lessons that I've learned from particularly that organization and seeing how they responded to situations they were facing.
Yeah, I think culture is just really such a big part of that, right? That culture that's really solidly based on values. Just in the interest of time, maybe we should, I'm not going to say a lot more there. I think you covered that one, Jan, beautifully. Yeah. So maybe we should move on to the next question. So I was going to chat next about what is a purpose-driven brand. So that's kind of the other part of, I guess, the topic for this is, purpose-driven. Is your purpose-driven brand future-ready? So Jan talked about what does future-ready mean? What really is a purpose-driven brand? And, obviously, each organization that operates in the social services sector or for a social cause has some sort of stronger purpose at their core. So, I think that goes without saying that organizations that are operating in the charitable space really fall into that group. But when I think about really leading with purpose, what does that mean? And I think it's about really understanding what is the why behind what you're doing as an organization. So I'm not sure if those on the phone have heard of the sort of notion or construct of the golden circle. But it's actually, something that was touted by Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why. So if anybody wants more on that, I'd encourage you to maybe consider picking up that book. But the gist of it, just for the purpose of our short conversation today, is that most organizations know their what. And Jan just talked about that, the importance of, when you're trying to be nimble and responsive, is understanding your what is really important to knowing, how to deliver those services and how to change those services. The what is the core of what you're doing every day. Your how gets to the unique way you do the what, the way that makes your organization unique and special. And it really goes back to what is your unique selling proposition, which is the core of any brand or marketing strategy. But at the center of all of that is really where we like to pinpoint the why. Your why is about something bigger than, just your what and your how. And when in Simon Sinek's book and in the model, the notion is that when you lead with your why, you're really connecting with people in the limbic part of their brain, the part of their brain that, you know, makes decisions through intuition and feeling, versus when you connect on the what, you're connecting with people in that kind of neocortex part of the brain, the part of the brain that's, you know, making decisions based on logic and facts. So by connecting with people on your why, you really create a much kind of deeper belief in the cause. So I'll give you an example of an organization that we work with and just kind of what that looks like in terms of the how, what, and why. One organization that we've been working with recently is the Camp Ooch and Camp Trillium. So, you know, they're what? They improve the quality of life for kids and families who are affected by childhood cancer. How do they do that? They normalize the disease by creating specialized camp-inspired programming, both in hospital, in the community, and through overnight programming at all stages of a child's cancer journey, and really develop relationships with those kids that are pivotal in the healing process. So that's kind of their what and their how. But their why, when you gravitate back to the why, it's really about believing that every child has a right to a childhood. So you can see that, you know, when that kind of becomes the front of your message, it really starts to create more meaning behind what you're doing. And there's two advantages, and just going back to what Jan said there, well, probably more than two, but a couple that I'm going to point out is, number one, the people in your network, both your internal and external network, can kind of grab onto that and really coalesce around that kind of higher sense of purpose. You know, and as well, when you're forced with making decisions, maybe there's changes that are coming from the external environment, such as we've all just experienced with COVID, such as, you know, the changes that hit the organization that Jan was just speaking about. You have something that grounds those decisions, right? To kind of guide the organization in making decisions and such. So I think that's really at the core. The other piece of purpose-driven brands, I think, which I won't talk as lengthy about just in the interest of time and kind of moving on to some of the other questions, is around having that based on a strong sense of values. So knowing your brand values, understanding what those brand values are, and actually, you know, living them on a regular basis inside the organization, and how you communicate outside and when you're dealing with partners, I think really form the basis of all of that.
Maybe I'd love that example, Shelley, just the depth of, you know, connection to who the organization is serving, and that rallying of the entire organization around that core principle or value or purpose for who they're serving can be such an inspiring way to connect. And we know for the sectors that we primarily support, that's often how they're oriented anyways. So often I think it's helpful I'll just take a minute to talk about purpose-driven leadership. Because when we think about the purpose-driven brand, how do we make sure that this then gets affected in the organization? And often leaders are asking, and I think some of the questions we got from some of our participants before they came in today was around, like, so how do I do this in the work that I do? And I wanted to just point to a couple of examples, or one example. You know, so what does it mean to be a purpose-driven leader? In the example that you gave, Shelley, they're driving meaningful change through the services they provide, changing the impact and the experiences of the clients, the communities that they're serving. They drive meaningful change always. That is their sole core focus, is driving meaningful change. And this is so at the core, I want to say it's like at the bones, in the bones for these leaders that we see. I think of more recently, a lot of attention was brought to, as we saw the recent passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the US. And, you know, her commitment, lifelong commitment to gender equity and gender equality and gender equity for women and women's rights. And when she first graduated from law school, she couldn't even get a job. As a woman and as a Jewish woman, couldn't get a job, but became the Supreme Court Justice. And that core solid focus for her entire life on her purpose. And she had that right down to her bones in terms of what her life's work was and the contributions she could make. And so no matter what challenges were ahead of her, she found ways through them and found allies to work with to make that meaningful change happen. Just one example. I think of many, but we're out of time, but think of many that, what does it mean to be a purpose-driven leader? And often I come across in our practice, in our work, a surprising number of leaders who actually haven't taken the time to articulate for themselves and for others around them what their purpose is and how the work that they do aligns with the work of the organization and their commitment to that. So that book that you suggested, The Start With Why, is an excellent way to kind of unpack that. And there are several others. So those on the line today, if they'd like some examples, we'd happily send them some examples after the session today. But it's a great first step if you're not that clear for yourself what your purpose is, to articulate that.
For sure. I love the RBG example because I think it really shows that you have to have a strong, you don't persevere for that long through that tough of a journey without a belief being at the core of that, right? She didn't approach this like, oh, I have these tasks to check off and I'm getting this task done or that thing done. But it was like a belief in what she saw the future to be, that she was, striving for continually. So I think, having that strong sense of belief in something really is like the driving force, right? And you're right that I think so many organizations, like every organization knows their what. Most organizations know their unique selling proposition or their how, or kind of how they uniquely do that. But what belief is it based in is the piece that, is often not fully considered. So maybe we should move on, Jan. I think the next question was about organizations that, might struggle with bringing some of these things to the forefront, right? You talked about, one great example of an organization that was future ready. We talked about, what having a strong foundation and purpose means and what purpose-led leadership brings to that. But, where are some of the gaps? What are the things that you see going wrong with organizations when they're kind of not able to drive either forward successfully?
Yeah, we could spend a whole day on some of the things that are certainly opportunities for organizations. And I'm looking at who our participants are, many of them leading nonprofits. And so have certainly probably worked through many of these trials and tribulations I'm about to share. And I'm going to offer that it's not the complexity of the work in purpose-driven social purpose sectors. It's complex. The work is hard. It's challenging. There are changes every day, even before the pandemic. The complexity of the work and the volume of need always exceeds the capacity of what organizations certainly have available to them based on the resources that they have. I'll start with the first one, which I, as a firm that focuses on a lot of strategy and leadership development, our core work up until now has been mostly about strategy. So I'll offer that one of the top fails or the top challenges is that organizations are not strategic. They may have a strategic plan, but they may not be using it to inform decisions. They may not have a detailed operating plan or business plan to guide their day-to-day work. They focus on the short term. They focus on the firefighting. They put greater emphasis on the short-term firefighting and don't lift up to look to the future, to anticipate and even plan out potential scenarios. They're also often not asking the right questions. When we do strategy work with organizations, we actually encourage them and recommend that 80% of their strategic efforts go into just defining the right questions to ask. Defining, like that effort that you put, the time, is are we asking, what are the questions we need to clarify right now about where we are, who we are, where we are, and where we'd like to be. And those can be tough to define and design. They need to ask questions about new paths for clients. So if you think of the last 7 months where some agencies are now doing virtual care, virtual delivery, are dropping off and providing services in communities. I think of my walks in the park. Well, this is not a nonprofit service, but I see all kinds of yoga and workouts and exercises happening in the parks that I walk in. Think of the pivoting that those providers have had to do, many providers have had to do. So what are those questions around the new paths for our clients to achieve the outcomes that we are mandated to deliver or to achieve for our clients? The services, our brand as it relates to the services that we provide, the future of work, and finding the right talent for our organizations. So now that people are, for many organizations who are closed or partially closed, some people working from home, how do we find and recruit and orient and onboard people who are working remotely and working across virtual and multiple sites and locations, including working from home? This ongoing, and it's always been a driver for nonprofits, but social and environmental justice are questions around that. So I was having a conversation with a leader just a couple of days ago around the priorities on their plates right now. And she said, we were dealing with just last year, truth and reconciliation as a priority for our agency. Then we were working on sexual violence. And now we're working on racial inclusion, but we're still not finished the truth and reconciliation work. And we're still following through on our sexual violence policies and procedures. But everything is important, but what's in front of us right now is more important, or it's seemingly more important. And just getting herself in a bit of a knot and trying to figure out, for my leadership team and for driving the initiatives in our organizations, where should we be focusing? Because those things from last year are still a priority, and we have only so much bandwidth. Technology, value creation, changing culture, and it's all the things that we should be asking very serious questions about our future, and what around those areas of how we operate need to be retooled, refined, revised, cultivated, strengthened in order to achieve our mandate as an organization. Clients, many that we work with, often choose too many priorities. They're often not balanced, right, in terms of looking at a holistic view of their organizations. They omit looking at their existing strengths. So what can we harness and leverage that already exists? There's often a desire to look outside, bring in consultants. And I know I'm a consultant, but I offer sometimes looking to the answer outside when the answers are often in the organization. And I think I'll just wrap up, because I could talk about this for days and days, but this overemphasis on perfection, on getting it right the first time. And that oftentimes we learn and grow, and our staff learn and grow through actually getting it not so right, through actually getting it wrong, and need to create cultures where it's okay to make mistakes, to try things out, so that people aren't hesitant to do the innovative work that we know right now, in this moment right now, is so critical to responding to the needs that we have in our communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, I think the point I love the most, well, they were all great points, Jan, but the point I love the most, I think you made there, is the one about asking the right questions. And so I just offer, like, obviously, from the way you framed it was around asking the right questions internally in the organization, but just to kind of play on that a little further, I think one of the gaps that I often see is too much, inside thinking and looking at what those questions are or what the answers might be, without enough actual, like, engaging audiences. So one of the things that we think is really important when you're really trying to crystallize that brand strategy is to talk to your stakeholders and really dig into some of those questions from multiple points of view, right? So audience is a great example where the community that you were serving today might actually be evolving because of things that are going on in the external environment, right? So if the community you're serving, they might be changing slightly, their needs might be changing slightly, how they go about things could be changing. One organization that we're working with has always delivered, at the core of what they do, in-person services are a huge part of that, and understanding what does virtual mean and how do you adapt to those new audiences is really important. So I think I love the point about questions and digging into even research when you're not sure, I think is a really big part of getting the strategy right and executing it well. The next topic that we had before we maybe close with some final thoughts and then turn it over to, hopefully there's the folks on the phone have been jotting down some questions as we've been going. Hopefully we've been answering some of the ones that you raised and framed in your when you registered. But the last question I was going to speak to was really what are the qualities and attributes of brands that are successfully living their promise? And you know, again, this kind of taps into some of the things, I guess, on the flip side of some of the, you know, challenges you noted, Jan, that I'd raise there, is that I think, you know, you mentioned culture, and I think I mentioned values at the outset. I think understanding the values of your organization really clearly and being not just, you know, not just like the words that might be sort of the commonplace values, like, oh, of course, everybody's organization values collaboration and values integrity and things like that. But it's actually understanding, like, uniquely how does that kind of come to life for your organization, or what does that exactly like mean in the context of your organization, and digging deeper into values like that really bring out the personality and the nature of your organization more strongly. So not kind of settling for those values that are based on the kind of commonplace words and things, but really, like, you know, taking your values as a foundational piece of who you are as a company and laddering that back to that core belief, that why that you have. And then, you know, having that really make its way through your organization. And before you start communicating your brand and your values to the outside world, it's really, really important that everybody inside the organization understands and buys into it, that you're, you know, the team members and your leadership team and everybody's on the same page. So, you know, one challenge that we see sometimes, we work with a number of organizations that have offices all across Canada. And often they're working almost like in unique silos. So each office sort of operates as its own legal entity. Maybe they're sharing a common brand name, a common like foundation name across the country or something like that, but they're operating as individual organizations. And in those kinds of organizations in particular, having that consistency across the organization internally before anybody on the outside is going to see, understand, or believe it is crucial. You can see how if the why, if the values aren't clear across your organization, then it's not going to be clear to the external audiences that, you know, those people are trying to communicate with. And then it kind of almost creates this sort of washed out sense of your organization, because there's like no clarity on what you really stand for. So I think that would just be the biggest thing, is, again, you know, having the organization based on the why, having the strong sense of the values, and making sure internally everybody understands those, and then that you know, fleshes its way out to the organization from there.
Love that, Shelley. You know, I just think of this, the how do we support organizations often to kind of embody and experience the values, so both in its creation, but also in its coming to life. And I think of some of the organizations we've worked with where we encourage conversations, sitting down and talking about how do these values express themselves every day? How do they inform decision-making? So teams having conversations about values at an organizational level. In the last couple of but the last year, we've worked with a couple of healthcare organizations where we help them to animate and have, you know, sort of an engaging conversations with their entire organizations, where their, you know, boards and their lobbies of their the front entrances of their organizations, where staff are placing kind of their daily experiences of their values coming to life. Having teams, supporting leaders to have conversations with their teams around how we have expressed the values recently, or what are we seeing and experiencing. Having value champions in the organization who are there to call out and acknowledge their experiences when they see values in action. These are the helping to lift the words off the page and actually see the living and breathing experiences of values, the reinforcement of that, the acknowledgement of that. It's there, Alistair, and often it's sometimes to call attention to it. and help all levels across the organization. We talk about board members as well, to really see and experience how the values come to life and where they're falling short, to actually look at ways to intentionally bring more of the value into the conversation and understand how they can inform both decision making, support development, support growth, and the full expression for the organization. So I could talk about values for days. That's something that's near and dear to being purpose driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great, Jen. I think those are great examples, and it's really, I love that, that notion of really engaging all the staff in that process in a really inspirational way. And you can see how what that ends up creating is like, it adds to the engagement. Like, employees are more engaged, and if employees are more engaged, then, your stakeholders are going to be happier, whether it's like a customer that's paying money for something, or it's a community that you're serving. So, you can really see how that engagement and kind of heart for the organization really kind of comes from the inside, and then like before it can be communicated on the outside, right?
Yeah. I wonder if there's a question in the chat from Sahara. I wonder, Shelley, if you want to comment on Sahara's question.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks, Sahara, for the question. It's, what about organizations that are not purely purpose-based? How do you communicate purpose without being disingenuous in a for-profit organization? So, you know what, I love that question. And I think it kind of comes back to the point I was talking about, with the why, and defining your why. It doesn't have to be like a purpose in the charitable sense. I guess that's something that's important to make. So, the example that in Simon Sinek's book, and his most famous example, there's actually like if you Google, there's a TED Talk where he outlines it, but he uses Apple. And in the case of Apple, obviously it's not a charity, they're a for-profit entity. And so Apple's what does Apple do? We make great computers / think of all the other products that have come after computers, iPhones and iPads and all that. How is Apple unique? We change the status quo by making products that are beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. So that's kind of part of their unique value proposition in those products that they make. But the why for Apple, we believe in challenging the status quo and thinking differently. So you can see that challenging the status quo and thinking differently is a purpose, a belief, a notion that everyone can grab behind. And when you read it in the other direction, I think this kind of, punctuates that idea of why, the book is called Start With Why. When you read it in the other direction, so I'll read it in the reverse. We believe in challenging the status quo and thinking differently. The way we do that is by making products that are beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We make great computers. Would you like to buy one? So you can see how by leading with that notion of why, or laddering it up to the belief system of the organization, can really, really like turns it around, right? So, in Sahara's example, it's a side business sending care packages to friends and family that people can't see during COVID. So it's a business, but there's a social element to it. So I think that's like an awesome example. So the why in that case, and I'm only guessing, and I'd invite you to actually turn your mic off and share with us as well if you'd like to. But it's about connecting people, right? It's about maybe tackling the notion of loneliness, or the idea of maintaining connections, or even when people can't see each other. So, you can position what you're doing with that, the purpose of that at the center, and, the execution, which is the delivery of the packages, and the thing you want somebody to buy is, a consequence of that belief that you have as to what's kind of led that organization to exist. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome.
Great, Shelley. Nothing to add.
So I think we could actually, we have a little bit of time for a few other questions. So maybe we just open it up. And I think there's such a small group on the line, like we'd welcome anyone to just, you don't feel like you have to use the chat. Like if you'd like to turn your mic off and ask a question to the group, we probably have a few minutes for that. If you feel more comfortable popping it in the chat, then that's cool too.
Hi, Shelley and Jen.
Hi,
How are
Rana. Nice to see you.
Hi, Rana.
you? Thank you for the webinar. It's very interesting to hear your thoughts on this subject matter. So, but my question is, we try as much as possible to connect with like our external stakeholders, which involve industry people, and like I work for Ryerson University, and so we work very closely with industry. But we find obviously like their time, like their schedules are so busy, and it's hard to gauge them sometimes, or gauge their interest. What are some of the ways you found effective in terms of sharing your values and getting the input from from external stakeholders?
Yeah, I think like the first thing I'd start with there is really understanding those external stakeholders, and kind of deeply understanding what motivates them, right? So, what are the drivers for those individuals? And obviously, like in your case, it's kind of a B2B type context, I'm assuming, when you're talking about stakeholders. It's not like students coming to the school. So it's a B2B context. But the thing that even in a B2B context, you're still approaching a person, right? So, for that person in that role within that stakeholders organization, like what is really, what are their needs? What are their like pain points, right? And then, the key to really making the ask or the, reach out, connect with them is actually linking your why and your core purpose as an organization to one or more of those pain points in like a really tangible way that they can connect the dots. And again, leading with the why, not like all the what's, kind of can pique their interest to more in that bigger picture notion versus like getting in the weeds about like this specific thing I want from you, right? So that would be my thought. I don't know, Jan, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. So building on Shelley's comments, I thought were excellent, and certainly where I'd suggest as well, starting with understanding what their needs are. And sometimes I like to focus on, well, how do you do that? Because, there's a lot out there around, you can do email campaigns and social media campaigns and all kinds of ways to connect with the audiences that you have, depending on, and I don't know a lot about your business, but your services, but I find that sometimes these this gathering of information, this understanding of needs, it's highly relational. And so these are conversations to be had, and starting off with a handful of conversations where you may have relationships to get a good understanding of needs, to then inform, then how do you then go out and then offer and make more offers, right? And if it's hard to get people's attention, finding out what will grab their attention. And that starting with a handful of people, having a conversation to understand what their needs are, what might cut through some of the bush, the thrush that they're fighting right now, as Chalksinga just noted in the chat, the fires that she's fighting. So what might pique their attention through their fires, and then go with that, and start with a handful. So sometimes starting small and focused is usually a good way to start, because we often try to swallow the watermelon whole, right? And do it all to start with. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you to both of you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
So I see, Chalksinga, you have raised the question. I think it's like the question that we often get asked, right? Is how to break that vicious cycle of being a firefighter to being a strategic thinker, leader, translator of values, priority setting. Do you want to elaborate? It's well said. Is there anything you want to elaborate on that?
No, I think it's something that a lot of people working in a nonprofit deal with all the time, and then it becomes the pattern, and we think that that's how we need to operate. But there's a lot that is is left behind and it costs somewhere along the way, right?
Yes.
So how do we do that? How do we mentally shift from firefighting to big picture?
Yeah.
What are some of the tricks? I know it's not a straightforward answer.
Yeah, no. Well, so just I'll share, and I just did a couple of sessions over the last couple of weeks, webinars on resilience and resiliency and being able to and focus and the power of focus. So I think of this is a common topic, and really what Shelley and I have been talking about, and Shelley made that emphasis earlier on around purpose and getting clear about your why, getting really grounded as a leader in your why, your organization's purpose, your purpose. And from there, I would suggest that purpose then translates into the focus, the strategic focus. So what is, and I've been encouraging leaders and organizations to think of one thing at a time. Although I understand for an agency and organization, particularly if you have multiple services and multiple lines of business, it may feel challenging to focus on one thing, but as a leader in the organization, what is your primary focus? So if it's a focus for the quarter, focus for the month, but being discerning on what occupies your time, what you're putting attention to, and then designing your time around that. This is, again, is a multifaceted answer, but certainly starting first at its core with what are you there to serve, to provide? What is your role in the organization? What is your purpose? So each and every day, that one thing you're trying to accomplish or move the needle on, and then designing your time around that. And it's you said the mindset, the tricks around mindset is ruthless attention to that outcome or that one thing that helps you fulfill your purpose and the purpose of the organization. And then, there's a range of things, and we certainly, this is probably more than a conversation in a few minutes can cover, but things like how you delegate, how you prioritize, how you say no, and where the priorities are coming from, if there are requests and demands from others, how you negotiate around those requests and demands so that you can be focused and be clear and be communicating and translating in that communication the focus and the priority for the organization. And so it may be a no, it may be a not now, or it may be a not me. And so being able to communicate that through your purpose and through your organization's purpose is certainly the opportunity. But again, there's a lot of ways we could sort of tackle this, but those are the ways in which to start the conversation of understanding how to get to the root cause of the fires and potentially distractions.
I would add another point of view to that as well. Like, I agree with everything Jan said, but something, I'll just maybe share it as an anecdote of a client that we worked with recently, and how I think this can play out, right? We were brought in to do a project with a client that involved taking a global campaign and messaging that was being used in Canada, and essentially, almost like testing that campaign with the Canadian audience and doing some research about the Canadian audience. And I found that, pulling that research together, talking with the audience, getting a real outside lens and outside perspective on the audience that this particular organization was trying to respond to. It was amazing in the meeting when we took them through the research findings and we took them through the results to see like light bulbs going on in people's minds, and just like realizing that the understanding of that audience and that audience perspective seemed to kind of elevate everyone in the room's thinking about their organization as a whole. So I guess the kind of moral of that story, and the answer, how I would think of the answer to the question, is if you're in that cycle of like, it's the urgent and important things that have to get done every day, I think finding opportunities to actually, whether it's engaging an outside firm or it's just, some type of initiative that you can run with the people internally, but, kind of purposefully adding some activities that get you outside of yourselves and get you a new perspective on the organization. Because like, there's a lot of sometimes like inward focused thinking without, that just kind of bigger picture lens. And I could see in this meeting, like this example that I'm talking about, is people were watching the slides unfold. They're like, oh my goodness, like this changes this changes that, this changes the way I think about this. So it kind of gets you out of that day to day and kind of into more of that big picture. So, you know, that would be something I would add as a thought or idea.
Thank you.
So I think, oh, we have a comment. Vanita provided a comment in the chat, but I don't know if you want to take your mic off and camera and share the thought with the group, Vanita. We'd love that. I don't want to put you on the spot, so if not.
Sure. Thanks, Shelley. Yeah. So one of my strategies is I actually can resonate that comment so well with my workplace is that you're always looking at one issue or the other coming up to your desk, and you realize I had so many things about learning, strategy, vision. How do I take out the time for all those activities? And what really worked for me was allocating a window of time and letting it known to my colleagues and staff and teams that Friday morning, 9 to 10 or 9 to 11 is my time for strategy work and investment on my time on broader picture goals. And it really worked. It's difficult. I think it's more about us than others. It's about our distraction. It's about our self-awareness. It's about my needing to control or manage few things, or my interest being diverted to something more than the other things. So it's self-management tool.
That's a great one. Thanks, Vanita.
Great. So we're pretty much at time. Do you have any final closing thoughts, Jan? Just I see most people are just kind of dropping off, but if you have any thoughts.
Thanks so much for those of you who are heading off for being here. Really appreciated the conversation. I think really just to emphasize, I think we've, in these last couple of points that have been made from our audience, you know, just that we've talked about brand and purpose, and we've talked about leadership. And I think all those go really well in hand to consider that leadership will actually make or break staying focused and future ready and purpose driven. And what's required of leadership is that steadfast focus and discernment in decision making. I think it's been delightful to see the range of perspectives and hear comments from our audience today. And I've learned from today's discussion and even thinking about some of the conversations we may have next, Shelley, in our next fireside chat. I think the other thing I'd add is that we've provided a number of suggestions and tips around how to take this forward, or what needs to happen to take this forward. And we certainly are able and available for those who'd like support on how. You might be able to take what we've given you today and run with it. But if you'd like support on the how, Shelley and I are certainly available, and just reach out to us. We'd be happy to support you.
Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, just given that we're over time and recognizing that others may have somewhere to go. But thank you so much for everybody who's joined us. I really enjoyed the conversation. Jan, thank you for all your insights, and to your team for helping us put this together, and to my team for helping with everything.
Thank you.
And everyone, have an awesome day. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for coming. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.